Hello, I'm Edward October. Over the years, I've narrated more ghost stories, horror shows, and creepypastas than I can count. And yet, the crimes discussed on our true crime podcast managed to scare the shit out of me. This program is not suitable for children or the faint of heart. If you are such a person, go ahead and switch off this podcast. Listen to something else. Are you still with us? Well, we've warned you.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, Cam, how are you doing?
I'm pretty doggone fabuloso. How about you?
I'm doing great, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Look who's back. Look who's back.
I know.
It's us.
Slim Shady.
No.
It's Slim Shady.
Look who's back.
Oh.
Look who. Maybe it's Slim Shady. I don't know. It's Slim Jen and Slim Cam is who it is right now.
It is. That's what we're trying. That's what we're going for.
Yeah, that's what we're going for.
Anyway.
So welcome back, everybody. Hope the holidays went well for you all. And I hear Jen has a little case for us.
We do. We'll talk about our escapades over the holidays, which is so exciting for us.
Escapades, yes.
Folks, she said,
with the
sarcastically.
Tinge of sarcasm.
Anyway, but we'll talk after, discuss things after.
Yes,
but let's get into this case right now, okay?
Yep, let's do it.
I want to say before we start, this is a listener request, and I apologize for it taking so long. This was requested by Carrie Sean, I think, Schaan, and this was from our Facebook discussion page.
Thanks, Carrie.
This. Yes. Little side note, I thought you were going to do it because you said you were going to do it, so that's why I waited. You said, oops, I already bought the book.
Oh, did I buy the book?
I don't know, but I kept waiting, and you never did.
I told you I have like 5 in the. It's my ADD. I start on one, and then I lose interest, and I move to another one, and then I go back to the first. Yeah.
No, well, you've never mentioned this to me, so I just decided to take it over.
There you go. Thank you.
So,
okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
All right, ready?
Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. Ready?
Yep, let's go.
On a cold January night in 1985, just outside of Wichita Falls, Texas, a bloodied and naked Toni Jean Gibbs tumbled from an abandoned trolley car where she had just been brutally raped and stabbed. Her attacker, knowing his job was done and that her death was inevitable, had already fled the scene, driving away in Toni's brand new Camaro. Stumbling through the dark across the thick and scratchy grass of a North Texas grazing field, Toni, in a state of shock, ran for help. When she couldn't run any further, she stumbled to the ground and pulled herself along on her belly. But there was no one around to help. There was nothing around for miles. Maybe Toni just wanted to ensure that her body would be found. She wouldn't be stuck in that rusty heap of metal, rotting away for years while her family wondered what had happened to her. Finally, when she could crawl no more, 23-year-old Toni rolled over onto her back, looked up at the endless starry sky twinkling above her, and took her last breath. It would almost be a month before her remains were found, and the Wichita Falls police would eventually tie the murder of Toni Gibbs to several other murders in the area, and early DNA science would squash any doubt that it was the technology of the future. Located in northern Texas, just 20 minutes south of the Oklahoma border, Wichita Falls is a sprawling, unassuming town of about 100,000 people, home of the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame, and the littlest skyscraper, which is really cute. It was built in 1919, and it's only about 4 stories tall. And very, very,
we call that
slim,
a house today.
I guess. Exactly. Yeah. Very slim. But Wichita Falls is a spot of civilization in the middle of a vast open prairie. On the night of December 20th, 1984, 20-year-old Wichita Falls native Terry Lee Sims went to her friend Lisa Boone's house on Bell Street after working a shift in the EKG department at Bethania Regional Healthcare Center. A student at Midwestern State University, Terry was small, intelligent, dedicated, and easygoing. She had gifted several co-workers boxes of chocolate for Christmas and had planned to finish her Christmas shopping that weekend. Lisa Boone and Terry Lee Sims finished working their shift at Bethania at approximately 11:15 p.m. They exchanged Christmas gifts at a friend's home after work, and Terry planned to stay over at Lisa's apartment that night to help her study for a final exam the following day. However, Lisa was unexpectedly called back to work the overnight shift, so she drove Terry to her residence after the Christmas gift exchange. She gave Terry her house key and dropped her off at approximately 12:30 that morning on December 21st, 1984. At some point after Lisa left to return to the hospital, Terry heard a disturbance outside. So she opened the door, only to see a man screaming up at the sky. When she called out to see if he was okay, the man stared at her for a moment, then charged towards the apartment's open door.
It's going to be a no.
Lisa finished the overnight shift at the hospital at approximately 11:15 in the morning and returned home. However, when Terry didn't answer the door, Lisa had to go next door to her landlord's to get a key. Lisa opened the door and noticed that the living room was in disarray. Furniture had been overturned and things were knocked over and broken. Terry didn't respond when Lisa would call out her name. Noticing the bloody clothing on the living room floor, Lisa realized that something was terribly wrong and ran back to her landlord's residence in hysterics. The landlord told reporter that Lisa had run up the street screaming, so he and his wife entered the residence and they discovered the dead body of Terry Lee Sims. According to court records, quote, Sims was found lying naked on her left side in a pool of blood on the bathroom floor. Her hands were bound tightly behind her back with part of an extension cord that was tied in 4 knots. Her body was covered in blood, and there was blood splattered on the bathroom walls and floor. The living room and front bedroom were in disarray. There were blood stains on the bed sheets and on the floor in the front bedroom. Sims's blood-stained clothes were on the floor in the living room and the front bedroom. Dr. Alan Stillwell, the forensic pathologist who performed the autopsy on Terry's body, testified that she had 8 stab wounds on the front of her chest, 3 stab wounds on the right side of her back, 1 stab wound, which was most likely defensive, on her left upper arm, and defensive cuts on her hands and fingers. Stillwell believed that Toni sustained most of these stab wounds after her assailant tied her hands behind her back. Terry also had bruises on the bridge of her nose, her lips, and above the left side of her cheek and eye, which the pathologist believed were consistent with Terry being struck by a fist or by her falling and banging her head on the floor. Terry also had additional tease wounds, which, from what I believe, is he would take the knife and puncture Terry's skin, and then to scare her more than she already was. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, he was purposely like harming her, but not fatally.
Right.
So just to panic her. Ooh.
Right. Horrible chills. Anyway, one of Terry's stab wounds caused hemorrhaging when it punctured a major artery, and other wounds caused her lungs to collapse. Terry Sims probably died from these injuries within 2 to 4 minutes after they were inflicted. Forensic test results showed the presence of sperm on the oral and vaginal swabs taken from Terry's body, and police also found that the killer had left a bloody fingerprint on one of Terry's shoes. 10 days later, Barry Maka took the office as the district attorney of Wichita County, Texas. Within a few months, investigators thought they knew who killed Terry Lee Sims, but didn't have enough evidence to convince Maka to indict. Just a few weeks later, on the morning of January 19th, 1985, 23-year-old Toni Jean Gibbs, who we said in the beginning, was leaving work when she encountered a fellow employee who needed a ride. This would be her last act of kindness. Originally from New Mexico, Toni Gibbs had been homecoming queen and decided to pursue a degree in art at Midwestern State University. She had originally considered going to school in Colorado, but while visiting 2 of her brothers in Wichita, she left the campus of Midwestern and fell in love with the school, and so she decided to go there instead. More changes were to come as Terry changed career paths as well. She became a nurse and went to work for Wichita General Hospital. A pretty girl, Toni was petite, dependable, and full of compassion. She loved art, music, and bicycling. In fact, her sister had gone out that morning and bought Terry a brand new bicycle as a gift, but unfortunately she would never get to use it. Toni encountered her killer at 6 o'clock in the morning after he had been out all night walking. When Terry failed to show up for work the next day, police were called. 2 days later, when her car, a Camaro, was found abandoned at Van Buren and McGregor Streets in Wichita Falls, the search began in earnest, and a $20,000 reward was established. 3 weeks later, Toni's naked body was found in a field by a utility worker in adjacent Archer County, Texas. The Texas Electric Service Company employee who found her remains had been out fixing a broken transformer. He had been driving along a trail through the field and spotted her about 100 yards off the road. Suffice to say, if Toni hadn't made her way out of the abandoned trolley car, the Tesco worker would have never seen her. District Attorney Barry Maka refused to release the details on Toni Gibbs' murder, much so to the extent that several days after her death, her own mother didn't know how her daughter had died, only that she had been murdered. In addition to being raped, Toni Gibbs had been stabbed 8 times, 3 in her back, 3 on her chest, and 2 defensive wounds on her left forearm and thumb. Her clothing was found in the abandoned trolley car, which was about 100 feet from where her body had been found. Now, of course, as happens, sales of firearms and defense weapons increased throughout Wichita Falls in reaction to the 2 women being murdered, and the students of Midwestern University and employees at hospitals started walking each other out to their cars. And it didn't take long for police to zero in on a suspect for Toni's murder. Danny Wayne Laughlin, 24, was indicted for her murder in October of 1985. What brought him to the attention of the investigators was that he made public statements claiming to have met Toni at a nightclub just days before she was killed, and she'd agreed to go on a date with him.
So he just wanted the attention. Okay.
Well, listen, here's everything of why, just not that. He also often rode his motorcycle near the area where she was killed. And as time went on, he even told people that he'd been in the exact same field where her body was discovered just days before it was found. He also failed a polygraph. Even though a comparison of Laughlin's DNA with DNA from the semen of the murder scene was unsuccessful and only circumstantial evidence was available, basically Laughlin's self-incriminating statements, right? Like he said, basically. Authorities went ahead with the indictment and trial. So after 2 days of deliberation, it was on jury.
Really?
So Laughlin was released from custody. And since only one of the 12 jurors believed that Laughlin was guilty, the prosecutors just dropped the case against him.
What?
Similarly, the main suspect in Terry Sims's case would never be prosecuted because there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime. In hindsight, the similarities between the murders of Sims and Gibbs are obvious. Each one had been stabbed in the chest, stabbed 3 times in the back. Both were found naked. Both had been raped. Both women were also extremely petite. Even though Maka may have felt that the 2 cases could be related, the cases were being investigated by 2 different police departments from 2 different counties. And at the time, the suspect pool didn't overlap. So he only just had that nagging feeling inside his head.
Sometimes there is something to that nagging feeling.
Those gut instincts are
stronger than anything else.
To be believed, yes. Just a month later, 2 hours south of Wichita Falls in Fort Worth, Texas, 25-year-old Deborah Taylor headed out to a local bar for a nightcap with some friends that had been visiting. Her and her husband had had a barbecue earlier that day. And I guess the husband didn't want to go out. I don't know, but she had left after her husband and daughter had gone to bed. And not wanting to wake her husband and most likely thinking that she'd be back before his alarm went off at 6 a.m., Debbie headed down to the local bar without even taking her purse. Didn't even tell her husband. She just left.
Did she do that often? Like, was it close? Like,
I don't know.
I was just wondering if
I don't
that's
know
for
sure. But she had friends in town.
Yeah.
So, you know what I'm saying? There at the bar, she had a few drinks and she danced to the music. And the next morning, when her husband, Ken, got up to go to work, Debbie was nowhere to be found. He called all the hospitals and every person that he had a phone number for just to see if anybody had seen his wife. And no one had. 5 days later, on March 29th, the police called Ken Taylor to identify a body. Debbie had been found naked in a grove of trees in a field. She had sustained blunt force injuries to her head and face, and her death was caused by manual strangulation. When the police asked Ken if that was his wife, his first response was no. The decomposed body didn't look like anybody he knew. But then the police showed him a few items of jewelry found on the body. They were his wife's wedding rings and a necklace he'd bought her for Christmas. And of course, what happens? The police immediately zero in on Ken, thinking that he'd killed his wife. That's what police do. It's always the people that you know first, and then they work out. There were copious amounts of skin under Debbie's fingernails, meaning that she had scratched and clawed her killer. Ken stripped down right there in the police station to show that he did not have a mark on him. Mm-hmm. He also passed numerous polygraph tests, and there was none of the usual stressors that factor into a person killing their spouse. Nothing seemed to be present in the Taylors' marriage. There was no major arguments or abuse, neither was having an affair, no money issues or huge debts or major life insurance payouts. Not one shred of physical evidence pointed to Ken Taylor's guilt, and yet the police believed that he was the killer and didn't consider any other options.
Not good.
Tunnel vision, we've seen it before.
Oh, yes, we have.
Only hurts the case and, leads nowhere. For 16 years, Ken was their number one suspect. Debbie's family, some of his own family, and his friends turned against him. Even his boss of 10 years fired him on the spot when he returned to work after Debbie's funeral.
Oh.
After that, he had trouble finding a job because his former boss would out him as, quote, the guy who killed his wife to any prospective employers who would call for a reference. Ken Taylor had been completely ostracized. His experience certainly tests the limits of that whole innocence until proven guilty thing. There was a show that I watched that actually had an interview with Ken on it, and the police were after him so much that his friend called him and said, hey, let's go have a drink. And so he was so excited to be with his friend who hadn't really seen him for a long time. And the friend kept asking him questions, and he realized his friend had a mic on him for the police. Yeah. I mean, I'm telling you. At the time of Taylor's murder, the investigation stood like this. There was 3 victims in 3 counties with 3 different suspects. The larger picture, a connection between victims, was difficult to see through all the mud of Texas crime, because in the mid-1980s, much of Texas was experiencing a wave of violent crime against women, so it was difficult to determine which victims belonged to which killer. 6 months later, in September of 1985, 21-year-old Ellen Blau, a native of Connecticut, had followed her boyfriend to Texas in what was supposed to be a new start and a beginning of a new adventure. Ellen was also petite and intelligent with a genuine smile. Her friends described her as being a walking encyclopedia, a Cliff Clavin, if you will. And she was able to, quote, tell you anything about anything. A few months after arriving to Texas, of course, the romance was over. Isn't that how it goes? Mm-hmm. But rather than returning home, Ellen decided to stay in Texas and further her education. Having very little money, her friends allowed her to stay with them while she enrolled in Midwestern State University in Wichita Falls. While attending school, Ellen worked at Subs and Suds. On September 20th, after her shift ended, Ellen would encounter her killer as she walked to her car. After being made to drive to a secluded spot, she was murdered by strangulation. Just 9 hours later, at about 10 a.m., her green Volkswagen Rabbit car was found abandoned near the Air Force Base. Inside were her keys, purse, a shirt she was wearing, and an empty beer bottle. And according to a newspaper, there was also a bit of blood. Reports in the newspapers at the time said that foul play wasn't suspected and that it was possible that she'd gone away for the weekend. Ellen's friends found this ridiculous because Ellen was extremely responsible and would have let people know, especially her roommates, if she was going to go anywhere. And she was also low on funds and only knew a handful of people in the area. Besides, how would she take a weekend trip if she left her purse behind?
Good point.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. Her friends immediately suspected foul play and began distributing the missing person flyers. Ellen's mother, Rima Blau, immediately flew to Texas from Connecticut. And 5 days after Ellen went missing, Rima still refused to believe that anything had happened to her daughter, stating, quote, "We as human beings protect ourselves from the emotional catastrophe." A county road crew employee found Ellen Blau's body in a field in Wichita County on October 10th, 1985. The state of decomposition was such that the doctor who performed the autopsy could only conclude that the cause of death was, quote, "undetermined homicidal violence." No DNA evidence could be gathered because of the condition of the body, but it was believed that she had been raped since her underwear had been pulled down. In May of 1986, Tina Elizabeth Kimbrew, a bartender waitress at a local hotel in Wichita Falls, Texas, opened the door to a friend who needed help. Several hours later, her bruised body was found on the floor of her apartment. The apartment was ransacked, and at first investigators thought she had fallen from the balcony inside her residence, and they initially told Tina's father, Robert Kimbrew, that she had died from the fall. However, during the autopsy, it was revealed that Tina had been smothered to death. Happy New Year, everybody!
Woohoo! Happy New Year!
I'm willing to bet that many of you have said, New Year, new me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know Cam and I
did.
Yep. And this time we mean it, right? Right, Cam?
For real.
We
For real
really
this
mean
time.
it this time. For a while now, Cam and I have been trying to become a little bit more conscious about what we put in our bodies and trying to exercise and all that kind of stuff. And honestly, one of the hardest things for me to do is the meal planning.
Mm-hmm.
Lately, I've completely lost interest in cooking at all. It's really hard to be creative in the kitchen. And I think the term is what they're called. I think what they're calling it now is called cooking fatigue. But this year, I have a nutritious trick up my sleeve.
Ooh.
This year, I have Factor meals.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Now, Factor's ready-to-eat meal delivery takes the stress out of meal planning. It's a step in the right direction to help us get to the new me. With Factor meals, we can skip the grocery stores and all that prep work, the boring stuff, and get chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals delivered right to our door. There are over 35 meals to choose from per week.
That's a lot.
It is, including options like keto, calorie smart, and vegan and veggie, and over 55 weekly add-ons. It's incredible.
And not only does Factor offer fast, simple solutions for when I'm too busy to cook, it also helps me stay on top of my goals. And I've said it before, and I'll probably always say this, but I have the hardest time eating enough proteins. And Factor meals always come to my rescue with their Protein Plus options. Each Protein Plus meal has 30 grams of protein or more, and it only takes a few minutes to heat up. So when you're hangry, it's gotcha. I suggest everyone try the garlic cream shredded pork and the chicken pot pie pasta. You can thank me later.
Oh, both of those are so
good, aren't they?
They really are. And you know what? Factor has other things besides lunch and dinner. Now they offer breakfast, smoothies, juices, snacks, and desserts. And if you have a need for a special occasion, maybe a date night with that special someone, Factor's got you covered. Mm-hmm. Their Gourmet Plus option is always a perfect choice.
It's great.
It will look like you've spent hours in the kitchen, and that's the best part. You haven't.
I know. So you know what? Let's all have a little less stress over mealtimes in 2024.
Yes.
Everybody head on over to factormeals.com/OTCP50 and use code OTCP50 to get 50% off. I'm going to say it again. The code is OTCP50 at factormeals.com/OTCP50 and get 50% off. You're going to love Factor Meals. Tina Kimbrew had been a perky girl with big brown eyes. She had also been a miracle child. Neither Robert nor Tina's mother, Elaine, thought that they could have children. And then one day, much to their delight and total surprise, Elaine got pregnant. Tina was fawned over, doted on, and just adored by her parents. And when Tina was murdered, the Kimbrews were devastated, as most parents are. But for Robert, he wanted to know why. The who was important, but the why is what kept him up at night. That and the circumstances of her death. When he talked to the coroner, she told him that based on Tina's general good health and age, it probably took her 7.5 minutes to die.
Oh.
Robert would find himself staring at the clock and counting off 7.5 minutes.
See, I don't think I'd ever want to know that. I would prefer not to know that.
It's a long time to know that you're going to die.
Mm.
So 4 days after Tina was found, a 27-year-old man by the name of Farian Edward Wardrop made a call to police from a hotel room in Galveston, Texas. He claimed he killed Tina Kimbrough while he was high on drugs, and that after he came down and started thinking clearly, that's when he remembered that he'd killed her. He was so distraught that he had killed his friend that he felt the overwhelming need to confess. He also stated in the phone call that he planned to commit suicide. When the police arrived at the hotel, Wardrop had changed his mind about the suicide and let the police into his room peacefully. Wardrop pleaded guilty to murdering Tina Kimbrough and was sentenced to 35 years in prison. Farian Wardrop would end up only serving 11 years of his 35-year sentence. Before his release in 1997, Robert Kimbrough wanted to meet face-to-face with the man who'd killed his daughter. And what Robert learned from Wardrop wasn't at all that satisfying. Farian Wardrop was a lanky, towering 6'5" man with bushy brows and expressive blue eyes. He was clean-shaven and soft-spoken. A native of Indiana, Farian had not experienced any abuse as a child or anything overly traumatic. He dropped out of high school in the 12th grade and was given a less than honorable mention from the National Guard due to his marijuana use and disorderly conduct, and he was often absent without leave, or AWOL. Wardrop claimed that all of his problems in his life could be traced back to his drug use, and according to him, if he didn't use drugs, he was a nice guy. And like I've always said, never trust anybody that says they're a nice guy. Farian was never able to hold down a job for any length of time, and his wife divorced him in 1986 and took the 2 children with her. This is one of the books I read. His ex-wife's dad actually came to pick her and the kids up to like an intervention to like take them away from him, right? To help.
Yeah,
that's bad. It was a bad thing. Like he threatened violence, everything. His ex-wife's dad actually kicked him in the face.
Oh.
And he went in the house and brought out like a butcher knife or something. But the family were able to get away. Thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
Mm-hmm. Wardrop told Tina's father that he had never hurt anybody before the day he attacked Tina. And that was the same story that he would go on to tell Tina's mother the next year. He did tell them both that Tina was an acquaintance of his, and the day that he murdered her, he was out of drugs and needed a fix. As kind as Tina always was, he thought that Tina might give him some money or maybe alcohol, just something to help him out until payday. However, something Tina said just made him snap. In his mind, he claimed that all he could see was his ex-wife yelling at him. And the next thing he knew, he attacked Tina and killed her. Robert Kimbrough left the meeting feeling a bit uneasy because the details that Wardrop had gave Robert didn't quite match up to the way that Tina had been murdered. Robert just had that unsettling feeling that Wardrop had just described killing a different young woman. And when Robert confronted Wardrop about this discrepancy, telling him that his story wasn't right, Wardrop blamed it on investigators, saying that he didn't understand how professionals could screw up the details of Tina's death that much. Yep, blame it on somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Farian Edward Wardrop was released on parole in December of 1997. He moved 90 minutes south of Wichita Falls to a place called Olney, Texas, and there he found redemption at the Hamilton Street Church of Christ. Margaret Carter, who attended the church, said, quote, "He was there every Sunday dressed nicely. He was getting the second chance that a lot of us get through God's grace. He seemed to be making the best of it, and we accepted him." At a prayer meeting one night, Wardrop confessed that he had just finished serving a manslaughter sentence for driving while intoxicated and killing his girlfriend. A lie, and one of many, but the people of the Hamilton Street Church believed him. Farian eventually remarried and became a Sunday school teacher. And for the moment, he was one of the success stories to come out of the justice system. Meanwhile, the murders of Terry Sims, Toni Gibbs, and Ellen Blau had gone cold. The investigators on Debbie Taylor's case didn't feel like her case had gone cold at all. In their minds, they knew her husband had killed her, and they just couldn't prove it. In 1996, District Attorney Barry Maka decided to hand some of the unsolved cold cases over to a new investigator named John Little. At this point in time, many of the Wichita Falls law enforcement believed that Danny Laughlin had gotten away with murdering Toni Gibbs. But John Little felt like he couldn't be distracted by the failed multiple suspect scenarios surrounding these cases. He was beginning to think that at least some of the murders in the area were committed by one person. John spent hundreds of hours examining old physical evidence, reviewing friends and families of victims, and talked to officers who had originally handled the cases. Then John discovered that Danny Laughlin had recently died in a car crash. So he compared Danny Laughlin's tissue with the DNA sample collected from the bodies of Terry Sims and Toni Gibbs. They didn't match, so Danny was innocent after all. Maka decided to have the DNA samples from the Sims case compared to the one retrieved from Toni Gibbs. And they matched, meaning Laughlin didn't kill anybody, but the same unknown person had killed both Terry Lee Sims and Toni Jean Gibbs. Unfortunately, there was no DNA sample from the Ellen Blau's case because her body had been too decomposed. Still, John Little and Barry Maka both now believed that the same man had killed all three. John Little cross-referenced the addresses of the victims' homes to where the bodies were found and the areas where they had been known to frequent. In February 1999, he discovered that many of the addresses were clustered in the same section of town. He also pored through the files, looking to see if any name, like a coworker or neighbor, appeared in more than one case file. What he found was that when Farian Wardrope had confessed to killing Tina Kimbrough, he happened to mention that he had known another victim. He had known Ellen Blau. Back in 1986, nobody investigated the fact that the man who had just confessed to killing Tina Kimbrough had also known Ellen Blau. It seems like a big flag, doesn't it?
You would think.
But maybe different departments? I don't know. It's still a lack of communication. Something's up. Oh, it's bad. As John kept investigating, he found more and more connections between Farian Wardrope and the three other victims. Wardrope had worked at the same hospital as Toni Gibbs, and he had lived in the same apartment complex as one of Ellen Blau's friends. Like in one of the books, it said that Ellen used to wave to Farian. Yeah.
Huh.
Like they were not knew each other, but like you wave at neighbors, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that apartment complex that Ellen Blau's friends were in was just a few blocks away from where Lisa Boone had lived and where Terry Sims had been murdered. John and D.A. Maka both believed that Wardrope was good for the three unsolved homicides of Sims, Gibbs, and Blau. They just needed to get his DNA. At the time, a DNA sample was not required from all convicted criminals in Texas. They only collected a DNA sample if the crime was of a sexual nature. And since Wardrope hadn't raped Tina Kimbrough, nobody ever collected his DNA, so Wardrope's DNA was not on file. John Little decided to set up a surveillance routine on Farian Wardrope. There was a laundromat that was situated right across the street from the screen door factory where Wardrope worked. So John would pretend to do laundry and watch the factory to see if Wardrope took his breaks. And I can't imagine a worse place to sit than a laundromat.
Oh, I think it'd be kind of fun. Good people watching. If there's people there, otherwise you're going to be bored.
I guess I have trauma from too many laundromats back in the day.
Going to the mat. Yep, yeah. I hear you.
One day, Wardrope's wife joined him for his afternoon break. Farian drank a cup of coffee and ate some cheese crackers. And you know these cheese crackers that we have here in the States. They're the ones with the bright orange, neon orange
glow in the dark
color. Yeah. And as Farian's wife was leaving, Farian tossed his cup that he had been drinking his coffee into the trash. Big trash bin. And that's when John Little made his move. And this is pretty smart, I thought. He stuffed a wad of chewing tobacco into his mouth. And he walked over to Farian and he said, "Hey, do you mind if I grab a spit cup out of this trash?" And Farian gestured towards the trash can that was filled with coffee cups and said, "Yeah, go ahead, help yourself." However, John just thought Farian would walk away, but he didn't. He just kind of stayed there, and he watched John. So
awkward.
John is like, "Well, I don't have time to really think, right?
Pick one of these
He's got to do it quick, right? Jig will be up if something happens." Not to get Wardrop suspicious, he quickly, so quick, like I don't think I would have had the brain power to do this. I know I wouldn't have the brain power to do this. But he noticed that there was a coffee cup that just had a tiny bit of coffee inside of it. Mm-hmm. And it also had the bright orange cracker crumbs on the rib.
Thank you, bright orange crackers.
Thank you, right?
Saved the day.
So that's the one, of course, that John Little grabbed. He took it in to get it tested. And when the samples came back from forensics, it was determined that Wardrop's DNA matched the sample taken from the bodies of Terry Lee Sims and Toni Jean Gibbs. And later, it would be determined that his fingerprint matched the one that was left on Terry's shoe at her crime scene. And as luck would have it, Farian Wardrop had an appointment with his parole officer. And as he met with the officers, investigators from Wichita County entered the room and questioned him about the 3 murders. Only when Farian realized that the district attorney had recovered his DNA from 2 cases did he decide to confess. He said he needed to make it right with God.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
On the night Farian killed Terry Sims, he had been outside wandering the streets, screaming at the sky when Terry opened the door to see what was going on. She reminded him of his ex-wife, which enraged him, and so he forced his way into the apartment and killed her. He said that Toni Gibbs had offered him a ride home from the health center, and he accepted. He said that when he got into the car, he became enraged for some reason. He attacked her and forced her to drive to the secluded spot down Highway 281 where he killed her. He left her there to die and drove away in her car. Ellen Blau was the one that investigators really needed the confession for since there was no DNA linking him to the crime. And Wardrop said that he abducted Blau from the parking lot and forced her to drive down a dirt road. He didn't remember exactly how Ellen had died, but stated, quote, "She probably broke her neck because I was slinging her." And as with Gibbs, he drove back to town and abandoned her car. Investigators sighed with relief. They had the confessions for all 3 of their unsolved cold cases, but Farian Wardrop wasn't yet finished. He stated that if he was going to confess to making right with God, that he had to include all of his victims. And that is when he told them about murdering Deborah Taylor in Fort Worth, Texas, which was a big surprise to them. Huge surprise, by the way.
They didn't know.
Well, they thought her husband did it, right? Mm-hmm. They swore her husband did it for 16 years. Now, Farian said he met Debbie in a bar and he had asked her to dance. And Debbie danced with him for a few times. But according to Wardrop, when he realized from her house she'd walked to the bar, he offered to give her a ride home. And she cautiously agreed. And as they were headed towards his car, he made sexual advances. Well, Debbie told him in no certain terms she wasn't interested in having sex with him, like at all. And of course, what? It made him mad. It angered him. And he killed her right there behind the nightclub and dumped her body in a field. Now, whether Debbie accepted his ride or whether he followed her out of the bar, we'll never know because we don't have Debbie's side of the story.
And he's trying to make himself look better versus him just attacking her.
Kind of. I mean, he still looks horrible because he killed her, but yeah. He's trying to place the blame, well, she didn't want to sleep with me, so...
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
In every one of these cases, Farian Wardrop stated that the women angered him and made him think of his ex-wife. He also used the term slinging them around when referring to the attacks. All the women were petite. They all were dark hair except for Debbie Taylor. And he was at least a foot taller of all of them. I mean, they were all little tiny things. And he was 6'5", I think, remember? Big guy.
Yeah, he's huge. Mm-hmm.
Interesting to note that in each case, Farian claimed that he didn't remember raping the women. He only remembered murdering them. Which, don't know why. He never remembers the rapes, but only the murders. And it makes one wonder why he confessed to Tina Kimbrough's murder at all. If his conscience bothered him so badly that he felt the need to confess to Tina's murder, then why didn't his conscience bother him enough to confess to all of them at the same time? It's possible that Farian was worried that he would have been a suspect in Tina's murder because several people knew that they were friends. It's also possible that he was worried that he had been in Tina's apartment and thought that it was only a matter of time until he was caught. By confessing, it gave him control over the narrative. He got to give his excuse of, quote, "the drugs made me do it," and possibly by coming forward, he'd get a more lenient sentence than if he was just caught outright.
That's what I was thinking, that he did it for that reason.
The fact that his victims were raped shows predatory behavior, and by claiming not to remember the rape component of the crime, Wardrop was trying to negate the idea of him being a predator. He was just a poor drug addict who lost control.
Mm-hmm. With people that reminded him of his wife.
Right. And of course, we have the question of whether or not there are more victims of his out there. There are dozens of unsolved cases from the 1980s, but since his method of murder was not only consistent, like he used strangulation, stabbing, and suffocation, there will always be a giant question mark on whether or not he committed them. But he did confess to most of them. I don't know. I don't know how that goes. I'd like to think that he's all done with.
I would hope so, but I doubt it.
Yeah. Farian Edward Wardrop was sentenced to death on November 9th, 1999. However, in 2008, a federal magistrate recommended that the death penalty be overturned because they claimed that Farian had received ineffective defense in his trial. And I'm taking this from Wiki right now because it's easier for me to understand, to be quite honest. And then in September of 2020, his request for a new trial was denied by the court and his death sentence was reinstated. So there you go. He's back on death row. And from what I read, he is one of the longest serving people on death row.
Well, I think he's exactly where he needs to be.
He is, exactly. So anyway, back to this. Farian Wardrop seemed not to have any regard for anything or anybody around him. He committed most of these murders while still married to his wife. And to know that she was married to a killer who was killing and raping women when she was married to him had to leave a deep psychological scar on her. And the shame and devastation that children of serial killers experience has been well documented. His brother, Bryce Wardrop, said that their family had been torn apart because of Farian's actions. Part of the family supports Farian, and the other half wants him dead. Bryce was consumed by hatred for his brother for a long time, but Tina Kimbrough's father, Robert, helped him work through some of that hatred. Still, in a 2001 newspaper article, Bryce expressed his desire to see his brother die by lethal injection. Quote, "I'll be watching a killer die, not my brother." And it goes without saying that Farian's victims and their families obviously suffered the most. Ken Taylor, the ostracized husband of Debbie Taylor, was finally vindicated after 16 years of living under suspicion. And one can only hope that he received some much-needed apologies.
That's what I was thinking. Like his boss, remember?
His boss, his best friend went and tried to get him to confess. His best friend came and said, "Hey, let's talk about this." And his friend was wearing a wire. Right?
That's one of those things I just don't know.
You can never forgive.
Yeah.
I know.
Just cut your ties and move on.
I mean, law enforcement's absolute tunnel vision ruined his life and the life of Danny Laughlin, too. It is perhaps Ken Taylor's words that really sum up the utter devastation that a loved one of a murdered victim endures. Quote, "How much can you lose and still be who you are?" And that is the conclusion of Farian Wardrop.
Yeah.
Not really one of those serial killers that pop into mind when you think of serial killers. Serial killers.
I bet you there's other victims out there, too.
Most likely, but why wouldn't he confess to those?
I don't know. Who knows?
It was kind of like that last minute thing for Debbie to not, you know what I mean? Like he could have gotten away with Debbie's, but I'm not really so sure he did. But I will tell you, and we've talked about this before, when you go to research things, there are so many inconsistencies between newspaper reportings and books and court documents and witness statements. This one is filled with inconsistencies. It's amazing.
That's why, I mean, sometimes...
And it's more than like, she drove to the bar, or she walked to the bar, or she got a ride to the bar. Yeah. It's like big glaring inconsistencies. So we just kind of picked one and went with it.
I mean, how many cases have we covered when they're like, okay, to be fair, on this article, it's said this versus this. Yeah.
Right. And we usually, when we do this, usually try to go with what the family says. Mm-hmm. Like, especially on TV shows, if there's an interview with the family, not what the TV show says, we go with what is said by the family. So they would know best, I would believe.
Yeah. Awful.
But anyway, thanks, Carrie, for the suggestion. This was a very interesting case. I was never able really to find out what the drug he used. At one point, it was somebody said stuff that they inject into the body. He injected into the
IV drug
body.
user.
IV drug, right. Somebody said speed. There was another drug mentioned that I can't think off the top of my head.
But you can inject speed, too.
You can inject anything.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
That speed was the injectable drug. But
maybe he just did whatever there was, too.
exactly.
Which would make him very messed up. I mean, not...
Right. We all know it's not marijuana. You just don't go on a...
No, typically, no.
In a rage.
Back in the
to kill
60s,
somebody
they
on
thought
Mary.
that, but now we know better.
Well, 30s, propaganda. It was something. And like I was telling you earlier, Toni Gibbs, if you see her picture, it's the picture. She's got short blonde, medium blonde hair. She's in a nurse's hat, and she's got a huge smile on her face, and she's got like the smoky eye makeup. If you see her picture, you're like, yes, I know her. Her picture is usually, I can't remember what TV show, but it's either like Cold Case
Files. I thought that's what she said.
Or Forensic Files. It's one of those.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't
can
know.
see it
but
right
the
now.
minute, the minute I saw her picture, I'm like, I know that face. But I never knew which.
And who it was. Or the story behind it. Yeah.
Yes, but I know the face. And if anybody watches any of those shows, you will recognize that face immediately.
Mm-hmm. That's...
But it's scary. Supposedly Ellen Blau, like he lived in the same apartment building that her friends did, that she would like wave to Farron. Like they'd see him out and she'd wave to him and just...
Yep.
Yeah.
Something snaps. I mean, how many times have we said that? And you can blame the drugs, buddy. You can blame the looks of your ex-wife, but we all know. We know. That doesn't... I mean, I guess people do snap once in a while, but rarely. Especially if it's
to snap
more than once.
4 times?
Yeah, exactly. Those are invasive thoughts that have been there for a while.
Mm-hmm. But there are 2 books that I read for these. One is called Screaming at the Sky, and that is by Carlton Stowers. It's Scream at the Sky, 5 Texas Murders and One Man's Crusade for Justice by Carlton Stowers. And the other one is Wichita Falls Body Snatcher by Jack Smith. And I think there's a third one, but I didn't bother with that one because there's conflicting evidence or conflicting things in both of those. And Lord knows you don't want to.
Nope. Well, good job, Jen. And thanks, Carrie.
Thanks.
That's
yes, thanks, Carrie.
I always like the...
Sorry it took so long, but we did do it.
There you go.
I promise. Kim, how was your Christmas? You want to tell everybody about it? How fun it was?
It was good. It was busy. My sister came home from Seattle for almost a day short of 3 weeks. So it's pretty go, 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 go. You know, like everything, there was peaks and valleys.
Always.
We'll just leave it at that.
It wouldn't be fun if it was only peaks or valleys.
Yes, correct. What about you? Good. How was yours?
Oh, it was nice. It was relaxing. Didn't really do much. It was nice. Everybody had fun. Saw family. I will say that, I can't not buy myself anything for Christmas. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Ethan and Anne from Wit Tea US. It's on Etsy. I bought myself a Dateline University t-shirt or sweatshirt, and it is the fun. I love it. It's got Dateline. It looks like a university sweatshirt, right?
But it's Dateline.
But it says Dateline University, and it's got like the date, I think 1996 or something like that in the middle of it.
Nice.
And it's
back
soft
in the
and it's
Phillips
comfy.
Days.
Yes. It's soft and it's comfy, and I absolutely love it. So check it out. It's WITTEEUS. So I'm telling you, it had the best. She's like, Anne, I guess, great customer service. And she's like, hey, if you really like true crime, if you've ever gone to CrimeCon. And I'm like, funny you should say that, Anne. And told her about the podcast.
Of course.
Told her, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, good.
So it was kind of funny. Yeah. So she's like, a true crime. And I'm like, listen to us if you get a chance. So if you're listening,
hope she listens to this one since you just plugged her store.
Exactly. Since I gave her a shout out.
For her.
Yeah.
And them.
So.
Well, good.
So anyway, but yeah. Totally look into it. The sweatshirt's great. It's comfy. It's nice and soft. And
you know me and my hoodies. Like I live by the hoodies.
Well, this isn't a hoodie. This is just a regular crew neck.
Doesn't matter.
This isn't a hoodie.
Doesn't matter. Just
hoodies kind of choke me a little bit.
I love them. I have to have that pocket in front. I have to. I just love it. It's my favorite. It's my favorite thing ever.
The kangaroo pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hoodies.
So, yeah. Did you watch anything over a break?
Oh, Jen. No, normally I'd be like, heck yes. When I say that I did not have a down day in the 2-week break, I'm not kidding. I did not have a down day. So no, I did not really. No, I didn't. I didn't watch anything. I didn't even watch murder shows. What's wrong with me? Yes.
Wow.
I know.
I did watch a couple movies. I watched Saltburn.
Oh, I did watch that. I lied. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Saltburn. That was interesting.
Yes, it was.
That was good.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It pretty much is Wuthering Heights a bit.
It's The Talented Mr. Ripley, but not as good, apparently.
Yeah, but I mean, it's got a lot of the same tropes as Wuthering Heights.
Wuthering Heights.
Yeah. Hype it up, buddy. No, Heights. Yeah. The Last Stop to Larima. Did you watch that?
I did not.
Have you seen that one?
Is it good?
Oh, that's good. It's about a small town in Australia.
Oh.
And yeah, and when I say small, there's like...
What's it about? Maybe I've seen
10
it.
people.
I don't know.
It's a murder.
Oh.
Nobody knows what happened. A guy disappears or he's murdered and nobody knows.
Is it a true story or is it a drop?
It's true. Oh. Yeah, they interview the people. It's very interesting. And when the town is small and so remote, like I said, there's maybe 10 people living in the town, if that. And it's like 500 miles from any other town. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, did they find out who killed him? If there's only 10 people there, it's got to be one of them.
You're going to have to watch it.
It's like Clue.
You're going to have to watch it.
It's like a real life Clue.
I know. But for the longest time, they had a hard time figuring out who did it. Yeah. And I watched The Holdovers, which is absolutely...
I haven't watched that yet. It's on my list.
Wonderful. Paul Giamatti. Mm-hmm. Love Paul Giamatti. It's on my list. And of course, what? The new Doctor Who specials. Because the love of my life, David Tennant, I'm the love of his life too. He just doesn't know it yet.
No, Jen.
My current husband doesn't mind. I watched all the new Doctor Who specials because David came back. He was the 10th Doctor and now he's the 14th Doctor for a little while.
Aww. I'm so happy for you, Jen.
I know. I loved it. I was so
miracle
happy
for you.
I had permagrin on my face the entire time I was watching it. So
of course
people would come in and I'm like, shh, be quiet. So... But yeah, believe it or not, I actually got some TV time in.
Not me.
I'm normally not a big TV time person, so.
Nope, I did not. I did watch Saltburn. That's about it, though.
Yeah, Saltburn was good. But definitely The Last Stop to Larima.
I'm going to watch that now. How do you spell Larima?
Larrimah.
Oh, okay. All right.
And it's the people are quirky. Mm. It
could play out like a drama, but it's not, right? Like the people are very caricatures of, yeah.
They're just, you just have to watch it. It's really good. It's really interesting. Even my husband, who doesn't like any of this stuff, he was kind of in it. Like he was watching it too. And we were trying to figure out what was going on. And it's just really interesting. Quirky characters, I'm telling you, it's a small town in Australia. We're the closest town. And it's not even a town. It's not even a village. It's
like a stop.
People just happen to live there. No, there's a bar, of course. Because, there's like a few things, but there's just not a lot of people there.
Good.
And it's 500 miles away from the nearest city.
Well, I will be checking
it's in the middle
that out.
Of nowhere, Outback. It's interesting. It's good. I liked it a lot.
Good. Jen, so do we have any promos?
Oh my gosh, we do have a promo. Method and Madness with our good friend Dawn. And I know we say it's our good friend, but Dawn's amazing. She's just a great person. I really love her. We met her 3 years ago at the True Crime Podcast Festival in, where was it? Texas?
Got me.
Somewhere in Texas?
Almost together.
I don't remember. Was it Fort Worth? Texas? I don't know. The last one was Austin, Texas. It was the Texas before
Dallas?
that. Anyway, I don't know. I don't remember.
Either. Somewhere in Texas, maybe.
Houston.
Maybe not.
I don't know. It was in Texas. I know. That's all I know for sure. Sorry, Dawn. But anyway, we were sitting together at one of the events and she had just brand new podcaster and we got to talking and she is the nicest woman, biggest heart. Advocacy training, all this. I mean, she goes deep down into these cases. You will love her show. I'm telling you, true crime.
What's the name of it again?
She's a good Method and Madness.
There you go. Just giving her another
she
plug
is
there.
like, she's a true
aficionado.
True girl.
Good.
I just love her. I mean, I love everything about her. She's amazing. Good woman is what I'm trying to say.
She's good, people.
Really, honestly, check her out. I think you'll really like her podcast.
Yep.
She's good. Good research. Good everything.
Good.
Underrated as far as I'm concerned.
Just like us, Jen. Just like us.
I know.
Just waiting for the
truth.
Just waiting for the whatever.
It might be our year, Camille. After 6 years, we might be an overnight success.
I think so, Jen. I think so.
On that note, tell all your friends about us if you like our show.
That's right.
And
rate. What do you rate? Star, subscribe. Wait, what is it? It's been too long. I can't
just
even
subscribe.
think. Yeah, do something.
Just subscribe.
Yeah,
whatever.
There you go.
It's all good. But yeah,
And
that's
share.
all I have to talk about.
All right.
That's nothing. I don't have anything else. I mean, we've been gone. The 12 Nightmares Before Christmas was a great success.
Woo!
Thank you all for listening. Ended off the year with a bang. And we just appreciate each and every one of you.
We do.
Thanks for keep coming back. And thanks for telling people about us.
Yep.
We appreciate it.
We do appreciate it. More than you know.
More than you know.
And
So
I guess until next week, same bat time, same bat channel. Remember, lock your doors.
and keep passing by those open windows.
Bye-bye.
Love ya. For more information about this episode, as well as all other sources, please check out our show notes or the podcast website at ourtruecrimepodcast.com. Our True Crime Podcast is developed and created by the hosts, Jen and Cam. Original music and audio mix of all our True Crime Podcast episodes is courtesy of Nico Vertesi from We Talk of Dreams. You can reach Nico at wetalkofdreams.com. Listener discretion is provided by Edward October from OctoberPod VHS. You can find all of his great works on YouTube. Please make sure to like and subscribe to our True Crime Podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. We can be reached on Instagram and Facebook at Our True Crime Podcast or on Twitter with the handle at Our True Crime Pod. You can also email us at ourtruecrimepodcast@gmail.com. We would also at this time like to thank our patrons. We would be so lost without you. Thank you so much. And if you would like to help support the show, you can check us out on patreon.com/Our True Crime Podcast. You can also show your support by leaving a 5-star review on Apple or simply just tell your friends about us. It's that easy. Love ya.
Looking for compassionate true crime? This is Method and Madness, a true crime podcast with a purpose. Shedding light on injustice and advocating for change. Join me, Dawn, as I take you on a journey of immersive storytelling and pose questions to get you to think about the method of the mind, the madness that ensues. We're going deep into the evidence, examining lesser-known cases, all while focusing on the victims and the survivors. Dive in to Method and Madness, available wherever you get your podcasts.